All right, so we're officially started here. Hello and welcome everyone to the Varsity Tutors StarCourse series, where it's June 1st. We're kicking off our college admissions series for all summer long. We've got Devery Doran here with us, former Harvard senior admissions officer and a long-time admissions expert. She can tell you about all those kinds of experiences, and she's going to be with us for 6 events this summer. We also have a couple other admissions experts and test prep folks coming in. So that all summer long, we can give you a guide to the entire admissions process. And we're going to start tonight by talking about doing your school research, picking which schools you're going to apply to, thinking about how to visit schools. And, you know, a lot of folks are going to be using their summers to visit campuses. What do you want to get out of those? How should you prepare for all those things? And so we are thrilled to have Devery here, and I'll leave it to her. Take it away, Devery, for night 1 of 6 of these all summer long.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much, Brian. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. I am usually located in San Francisco, thus the very fun Golden Gate Bridge background, but I'm actually in Hong Kong today. So I am just very excited to actually get to chat with y'all and start off this series for the summer. Cool. Well, let's see. So let's get started on what we are going to do today. So I would actually like to start off with a couple of questions before we jump into today's agenda, with a couple of questions. And I want to know what college you want to go to, right? So what college are you most excited to attend? Then just kind of pop them in there. I'm saying Johns Hopkins. Let's see what else we get. USC, awesome. UF, UCLA, Cornell, woo, Yale, Duke, Richmond, Notre Dame, awesome. Okay, awesome. Thank y'all so much. So, all right, so let's talk a little bit about how you actually decide what's the best college for you. So I'm curious, how do you think you actually do that? You know, what is the best way to choose the right college for you? Is it A, work your way down the rankings until you find the highest ranked school that your GPA and scores qualify you for? Is it B, trust your younger self? If you have a favorite college sports team or a collegiate sweatshirt that you got there, why complicate things? Or is it C, there's a lot to it. Think about your career goals, the learning environment that's best for you, the cost of attending college, the place you want to live for 4 years, etc. All right, looks like I'm getting a bunch of C's, and yeah, that's what it is. It is a multifaceted process that involves a ton of research, right? And it can be really challenging to know where to start. And I often see students saying, okay, like, I don't even know where to start, so I'm just going to go to the rankings, right? Like, I just want to choose top schools, top 10 schools, or I want to choose the top schools for this program, or top 10 schools for the best sports teams, things like that, instead of actually kind of digging into the overall fit of a place. So what I want to talk about today is how to actually go beyond just kind of this, I guess, this kind of more superficial, this kind of first sweep of, choosing a college that you've heard of, choosing a school that's always kind of been in front of you, and dig a little deeper into the why, how to find schools that are a better fit for you, try to give you a toolkit of research techniques that work for you, talk a little bit about school visits and how to make the most of those if you have the opportunity to actually walk around some colleges or even do it virtually, and talk a little bit about how to actually, take all that research, put together a list of colleges, make sure that it's a balanced list of colleges, and make sure you are kind of putting your best foot forward and really thinking about an environment where you are going to thrive. All right. So, a couple of things that I would, really want you to note is that, the trends are pretty clear. As we were looking at college admissions, like every year is a little bit more challenging, right? It's a little more challenging to get into colleges every year because the number of applications are increasing. So students are submitting far more applications than ever before, right? So more and more students are applying to more and more schools, making admissions rates go down. Admissions is also far from guaranteed. There's basically no guarantees out there short of maybe a state program that guarantees admission, to the top 5% of students who are applying from, certain high schools. Barring that, this is a really nebulous process. You're not really sure how admissions officers are making decisions. There's so many factors, so many different factors that go into how admissions officers are making these decisions, that you need to know that admissions isn't guaranteed, and you want to set yourself up for success. You don't just want to apply to, the top 10 schools that, US News and World Report tells you are the top 10. You really want to set yourself up to be at places where you are going to thrive academically, you're going to thrive socially, you're going to thrive in the community, you're going to find your people, it's going to help you with your career goals, it's going to offer the support you need during college and beyond. So you don't just want to apply to colleges that have a 5% acceptance rate, because you may not get into your dream school. And it's quite possible that with kind of the limited knowledge that I think, honestly, we all have about what colleges have to offer beyond kind of some of those like superficial things, that it's quite possible you don't even really know what kind of environment you want right now, or really all of the cool things and experiences that certain colleges have to offer. So it's really, it's possible you haven't even heard of your dream school just yet. And that's kind of what we want to talk about that a bit more. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about establishing kind of your own particular criteria. So what is the most important criteria for you in choosing a school? And this is actually a question I'm asking. So if y'all can answer that really quickly. What do you think is the most important criteria for you specifically in choosing a school? GPA, okay. School environment, bio program ranking, quality of education, grades, graduation rate. Yeah, so not what the college is looking at in you, but what you're looking at in the college, right? So not what admissions officers are saying, but what you're saying when you look at that college. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of programs of my interest, community, affinity groups, what the alumni networks look like, and so on. Okay, that's great. These are all, excellent things to be paying attention to, right? There's also, you really want to be aware of these, because you need to figure out what your top priorities are, at least where they're starting, right? So other things we might look to is, finance, right? Geography, like what is actually a place where you are, what is a place that's going to be an overall great fit for you? So when you're actually establishing your criteria for where you want to apply, you're doing that because we need to narrow down all the possible choices out there. So there are 4,000 plus colleges and universities, degree granting institutions in the US alone, right? So having that many even available to you is pretty overwhelming. And so we want to get that narrowed down pretty quickly, maybe to like 100, right? Just so that we kind of have that place to start. And so in order to do that, you've got to kind of take stock in what you care about, what you're interested in. You've got to really ask yourself why. Why is a really important part of this process. And I think because so many of us are influenced by siblings and parents and our teachers and, and media, that we only kind of know what we know, right? And so if, when it's time to actually start thinking about ourselves, it's kind of harder to really know when somebody asks, well, why is that interesting to you? Or why do you like to do that? It's kind of hard to think about that on the spot sometimes. And so it's really important to kind of take a step back and be introspective. And so if you say, what, I really love biology. And so I want to find some really strong biology programs. And so you have to ask yourself, okay, what do I want to study and why? You're telling me that you love biology, but what is it that you enjoy about biology? I need you to kind of like really take a moment and think about, what are the aspects that you enjoy? Is it the practicality? Is it how you can actually kind of see it in everyday life? Is it that you had a great teacher? Is it that it comes easy to you? Is it that, you can see what biologists can do as a career path, and that seems really interesting to you? Is there something you specifically want to work on? Do you have goals within that kind of academic program? And so, You need to say, all right, here's what I want to study, or here's what I might want to study, and here are my whys behind it. And your whys can't just be, this is what my parents want me to do. They say I'll always have a job. That can definitely be part of it, right? But you don't want that to be the only thing, right? So you need to say, what are some programs that I'm interested in, or what are some programs I'm interested in learning more? What do I want to study and why? You've also got to ask yourself, I don't really know. I really don't know. Sometimes you don't really know what you want to do. And so you have to say, okay, but what are some of the, what are some of the things I enjoy and don't enjoy? And can I find some commonalities? And it's, how am I spending my time outside of the classroom? Like, how am I demonstrating my intellectual curiosity? Am I reading books, right? Am I listening to podcasts? Am I reading articles? And what subjects do they have, do they tend to be about? And why does this interest me? I always also have students think about, when's the last time you went down a Reddit rabbit hole or a Google rabbit hole, or you were on Wikipedia and it kind of just led to a search and you kind of lost track of time. I also want you to think about it that way, because there are so many interesting subjects out there that you don't have to just like one thing. College is about a time of exploration. And so if you're not sure about what you want to study, that's something you need to pay attention to, right? If you don't know what you want to study and you want to have flexibility in your programs, and that's something you need to think about. You need to say, I don't want to go to a school where I have to choose my major immediately. I want to go to a school where I'm going to have some time to try out things, be flexible, and figure out what I want to do, and be supported to do that. So with academics, you definitely want to ask yourself, what is my why? What am I interested in now, right? You also want to think about kind of some of your more, your hard preferences in terms of, what about geography? Where do I want to be in the world? Do I want to be close to home? Do I want to be in an urban environment, a rural environment, maybe a suburban environment? Does the size of the school matter, or is it more kind of the size of the classroom? Do I want to, have a residential experience where I'm living on campus all 4 years, constantly interacting with my classmates? Or, do I want to have kind of an off-campus kind of vibe, be in a fraternity or sorority, things like that, right? So you need to think about, where am I going to thrive in terms of kind of location and size? And you also need to think about what you're going to do outside of the classroom. And I will talk about this. I think this is our next webinar. I'm going to talk a bit about how kind of admissions officers are making their decisions. And a big part of that is going to be can they imagine you on their campus, both as a student and as a student and as a community member? And so when you're looking at colleges, you also want to think about, how am I spending my time outside of the classroom, right? Do they have the type of activities that I want, that maybe I'll continue with from high school or try for the first time? Do they have certain pre-professional organizations? Yes, again, do they have a residential, non-residential life, a big sports team, lots of school spirit? Are they, what are students doing on the weekends? Is this a place where I'm going to be happy? And so again, every time you're establishing kind of this foundational criteria, you need to ask, why? Why is this important to me? Why do I want to study this? Because that's going to help you really narrow in on that initial criteria that you'll be able to expand on as you start your research. Because as you start your research, you're going to see that you have other preferences, and maybe some other hard wants or hard no's that you might say, what, this type of school isn't for me, or this is exactly what I want, and I want all my schools to have X. So as you start to do your research, the more you're going to start to learn about yourself, the more you're going to start to learn that colleges actually offer. And so your criteria will change, but we want this base criteria. We want you to start off with this base criteria before you just start kind of randomly looking at colleges. So let's make sure we really ask ourselves kind of why here. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about getting to know colleges. And kind of as I mentioned, you don't know what you don't know. Again, so many of us really only have kind of this superficial kind of understanding of what colleges have to offer, right? We're not really thinking about, I don't really know how students choose their classes, or what's the likelihood I'm going to get all the classes that I want. I don't really know what students are doing on the weekends. I don't really know, which professors are teaching and what they really kind of focus in on. There's so much that we don't know what to look for. And so you really need to get to know colleges. And a really good way to do that is to talk to people who have been to college, but have also specifically been to the colleges that you are interested in. So it's a great idea to, of course, talk to your parents or to adults in your life that, have gone through a college experience. So that could be, your teachers, your parents friends, your siblings friends. I can probably give you a bit more of a straightforward opinion about their own experiences. You really want to visit colleges and attend college fairs, even if you don't think that you will apply. So I think to just establish kind of a baseline of understanding, you want to expose yourself to different types of colleges. So if you happen to live, near the big state school, and you're like, yeah, that's not really what I want. I know I want a smaller environment. That's totally fine. But it can be a really good idea to go ahead and, walk around that campus, to take a campus tour, to really get a sense of what it might be like to go to a large college, so that you can either definitively rule it out, or you can say, you know what, maybe I was too quick to judge, or you know what, a large university actually has some really cool things to offer, so maybe I might reconsider, or maybe it'll give you some different parameters to actually add, to your own desires for what your college will look like. So I definitely suggest that you visit a local college if you can, especially before you start to plan maybe those bigger college trips. I know a lot of families will do those over the summer or over spring break, and you'll try to hit up 10 of them, as you're going through the Northeast, or going in the middle of the country. But it'll be a great idea for you to get a little experience at the local level before you kind of jump into that. And let's see. So I think it's also important for you to really take thorough notes when you're getting to know these colleges. You want to really ask yourself what's standing out to you as interesting. What else can you add? Like I said, what else can you add to your criteria? Just make sure that you're keeping an open mind when you're visiting these campuses, and ask questions, talk to people on campus, talk to maybe some students that you're seeing. There's nothing like getting the honest opinion of a current student that can be really helpful in this process. They have so much knowledge. They are living that experience. They're living it now versus parents who maybe did it a couple of decades ago and things have changed a little. So you want to actually experience the college or experience a college or two before you rule anything out. Great. All right. So another thing that you need to think about before you kind of are coming up with your list of colleges, or something that I think is very important as you're trying to establish your criteria, is to have a family conversation. All right. You've got to be very open and honest about the financial cost of everything. So it is important to, very early on, have a conversation with your parents, your guardians, about what you all can afford. College is a practical investment, right? You are going to get a lot out of the experience, but there may be some limitations that that your family has. And so you need to talk to your parents and guardians about your financial plans. Like, how exactly are you going to pay for it? Do they have money set aside? Is there an expectation that loans will be taken out? How much do you need to pay for it? And so on. Every college has net price calculators on their financial aid website. So, that's a good place to start with your family, to say, all right, how much does it actually cost for us? Not just what is the sticker price, but how much is this actually going to cost? And I want you to do that because I would hate for students to, get into dream universities or get into universities that they're really excited about and ultimately not be able to go. And so you want to lay this all out on the table beforehand to make sure that you're actually giving yourself choices that are going to be available to you. Okay, so that's kind of from the financial side. But I also need you to be open and honest about kind of your own stats as you get started looking at your, potential college choices. Okay, so I need you to look at your own GPA and the rigor of your curriculum. So what kind of classes have you taken? Have you challenged yourself? I need you to take a look at your test scores, kind of do a deep dive into what your activities have been, what your impact and leadership have been, outside of the classroom. And I want you to look at, kind of some of the stats for some of the colleges that, your dream colleges that are out there. And so if you look and you see that the University of Michigan, if you look and see that their test scores from the past couple of years are, out of your range, like the average student had 100, 200 points higher on their SAT than you did, then, that school might be out of your reach, right? And so you don't want to only be applying to colleges that you're not kind of, you're not falling within the range for them academically. You want to be honest with yourself. You absolutely have a couple of those on your list, apply to a couple of those places, but you don't want to only apply to places that are out of reach. You don't only want to apply to places that have a 5% acceptance rate, because you're not going to be setting yourself up for success. You're likely to get a bunch of no's or all no's if you don't actually apply to colleges that are kind of within your range. Okay, so it is important to kind of have a moment where you really know, what is available to you in terms of finances, what is available to you in terms of where your academics are. And something else I want to note is, we haven't really even talked about rankings yet, right? Like, we are talking about establishing your own criteria first, beyond, digging into what US News and World Report, what Forbes says are the top colleges, because you need to first establish what is important to you before we can actually even kind of really dig into these rankings. Okay. So there are so many tools out there for you to use when you are starting this process. So we want to talk a bit about some of the techniques that you can have and, kind of the toolkit that you can put together when doing this. So what are some of the tools you're using or you think you'll use to research colleges? Can y'all throw those in the chat? College websites, books, niche.com, online resources, Naviance, Google, CapEx, College Vine, Wikipedia, friends that have been to the college board. Great. And then I have, what do you suggest? Well, thank you for setting me up. All right. So what are some of these tools? Let's go ahead and dig into some of them that are out there. Y'all already mentioned them. Great. So some great tools that we have out there are guidebooks. The FISC Guide to Colleges comes out with a new guidebook every year. I like it because it has student feedback. It has the numbers piece of it, but it's kind of more of a well-rounded, holistic perspective than just pure numbers. There are some great filterable sites out there like Big Futures, Naviance, some good ranking sites, a useful tool, but it's definitely not the only thing you want to look at. And some great books that can give you kind of more specifics, that can give you a little more student perspective. So Big Future is run by the College Board, and they allow you to filter by major, filter by location, filter by activities, filter by size. So you can kind of start to, by using these filterable sites, you can actually start to narrow down that list pretty dramatically, from 4,000 to under 100, so that you have a starting place, right? So that you can say, okay, these are the things I know are important to me. And then you can play around with it too and see what else pops up when you maybe change a parameter, when you maybe say, okay, like maybe I could go to a smaller school. Let me see what that would look like. Let me see what that adds in. I do want to mention now with ranking sites that, ranking can be, again, those ranking sites can be a great place to start, because they might actually expose you to some colleges that you're not familiar with. When you say, okay, I really want to go to a college that has computer science, but focuses on, AI. And so I want to find those best schools out there for that. And, something might pop up where you're like, oh, I've never really thought about, or I've never even heard of the Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology in Indiana, but it looks like its grads go to some really incredible places. They have all the courses I want to take, and they actually have a really high acceptance rate, but that doesn't seem to be, but that's not inhibiting their students from going to these like great companies and having these great internships. So by actually using those rankings, you can start to see some other colleges that are out there. But I don't want you to live or die by these rankings, right? They are not just a universal truth out there of this college is number one, this college is number two. I actually had a webinar yesterday where I was talking about rankings. And one of the things that we noticed was, a place like Columbia went from, 2 years ago being number 3 to last year being ranked, I think, like tied to be ranked number 18th or 20th. And, we have to ask ourselves, what does that mean? And how does that happen, right? I don't think there are any like dramatic changes in teaching or what was offered, but but it's like depending on what the rankings are actually looking at, what metrics they're using. And different companies use different metrics. Some will ask professors to write in about the quality of students. Some won't ask professors anything and will actually ask students to rank their professors. Some are going to really be looking at more at like hard numbers of, if students submitted SAT or ACTs, what was that range? How many students actually said yes to the school if they were admitted? So what's the yield? What's the percentage of students that go on to grad school? Things like that. And some of those things probably don't pertain to you specifically. A lot of those things can be a bit more subjective, right, than objective. And those rankings aren't designed for you individually. Those rankings aren't saying, this is the perfect college for Brian, right? These rankings are just kind of giving you some general information. And so you want to take them with a grain of salt, right? You want to say, good place to start, good place to learn about these programs. But ultimately, I don't know why, when they say that, Harvard is one of the top schools, like they're not saying why that is specifically for you. So you have to go in and say, all right, let me dig in and look into academically, why is this a good fit for me? What academic programs does it have? What professors are working there? What research opportunities am I going to have? How much flexibility am I going to have in choosing my major and deciding to do something else? That's going to work for me. And then you look at the extracurriculars and the additional opportunities. You look at the community and the residential life and say, is this a place where I'm going to thrive? So you can start there, but then you have to dig in more and know, is this ranking right for me? Not just, is this ranking something that's recognized? This is the school that's recognized, but is this the place that's actually going to be, set me up for success? I'd also like to mention the Common Application here as well as a great tool. So the Common Application is likely an application that you'll be using when you're applying to colleges. About 1,000 or so colleges use it. So about a quarter of the colleges, the majority of, let's say, the top 200 use the Common App with the exception of a few colleges like the University of California system, MIT, Georgetown, and some others. But if you are applying to, more than just a couple, you will likely be using this. And the nice thing about the Common App is that they have like a college search filter as well. Oh, sorry. They have a college search filter as well, and they have some great videos. So it's also a good place for you to find additional information as you are actually kind of filling out your app. Brian, were you trying to ask something? Sorry.
Not me. No, I think still all you. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought I heard somebody there for a second. My apologies. All right. Okay. So starting your college search. So as I said, these rankings, let's use them, but let's use them really broadly. And instead of saying, I want to go to a top 10 school for anthropology, let's try a top 100, right? Let's expand it because, like I said, Columbia went from 3 to 18 in a year. So let's try to keep a bit more of an open mind about these rankings and use them just use them as kind of as a general guideline. So let's, try top 100 instead of top 10. You definitely want to use filters that narrow your search, as I mentioned. That'll, at least with anything that's kind of a hard fact for you, a hard want, you can do that, and it'll help kind of reduce those colleges pretty quickly. And don't try to do everything at once. I think it's good to start with a few options, a few parameters, and then you can dig in from there, especially as you start to narrow it down. Then you can really get into more of your preferences, because you might, we'll have a lot of wants for what you want out of college, but they may not be deal breakers, right? You want to kind of start with the deal breakers, then maybe play around with those filters. And as you start to find things you like about these colleges, you'll be able to get into more of those, like those really specifics of what you're looking for. Because that deeper research is going to help you kind of refine your criteria, refine those filters, and help you find places where you'll thrive. Because there are lots of colleges. I mean, for most of us, for most of y'all, any college you go to, you'll be fine, right? You're going to make the most of it, but we don't just want you to be fine, right? We want you to be at a place where you feel supported, where you feel like you can thrive, where there are the right opportunities for you. So that's really what we're trying to do with this search. It's not just, am I going to be okay? It's, is this the place that's going to help me get where I want to go in all of these, kind of all of these different ways. So we'll start, you start with start a bit more general, then you can get deeper and, really have your preferences kind of come to light as you start to actually decide where you're going to attend. All right. So as you're starting to do your research, I've kind of mentioned some of these, but I'll just kind of reiterate a bit here. I want you to be able to fully envision yourself on a college campus. Okay. So when you are actually saying, yes, this is the school that I'm going to apply to, like I'm done kind of researching, I know I want to go here. I need you to be able to say, I can see myself here. Not, I have to have a school that has a higher admissions rate, a school that's a safety. So I'm just going to apply to this school. I don't want you applying to schools unless you can fully see yourself there. And in order to really fully see yourself there, you have to have all of your whys, right? You have to have a list of things that you're excited about that college. And so it's, do they have your major or, the classes that you want? Do they have professors working on topics that excite you? Who's actually, right, who's teaching these classes? Is there flexibility in the classes that you take? What's the average class size going to be? Is it likely that you're going to get the classes that you want? How are you going to be spending your time outside of the classroom? What's your living environment going to be like? These are all things that you need to be able to answer before a college goes on your list of I'm going to apply here, right? You can say, I really am excited about the school. My parents have gone here, my siblings have gone here, and that's great. But I want you to be able to, you need to be able to do this research and do it for yourself, kind of outside of them, before you put it on your list. Okay. School websites and tours, kind of tend to speak pretty generally about the kind of the college experience. So you're going to have to find ways to go a bit deeper, right? You want to make your research specific to you and to your specific, your potential experience. So it's not just, our students happy here. It's, are you going to be happy here? Have you found the activities? Have you found the things you're going to be doing on the weekends? Have you found the professors you're excited about, right? Can you fully envision yourself on this campus? And I will say, by doing this in your research, by being able to say, here are all the things that I want to be a part of, here's how I'm going to kind of take advantage of this institution and also contribute to the community here, that's going to come out in your application and actually make you a stronger applicant, which again, we'll talk about in a different webinar. But the more research you do early on, the stronger your application is, because you're excited about it. You can fully envision yourself there. And in turn, the college admissions officer reading your application is going to say, yeah, Brian, Brian's, I can totally see him working in this lab. I can see him being on the intramural teams and being like a real, dorm kind of a dorm cheerleader. And I can see him like taking advantage of X, Y, and Z. right? So the more you can envision yourself at a college, the more that's going to come out in your application and the more compelling your application will actually be. Okay, moving on. All right, so again, as I mentioned before, there are lots of tools out there to help deepen your search. You really want to be thinking about fit. So I definitely suggest that, again, we're really looking for, the traits that you want, the experiences that you want. Sometimes you can also say, which schools are other students, like me considering. Perhaps that's through your major, perhaps that's like through an activity that you're looking for. So somebody mentioned, kind of niche.com, right? Niche.com has quizzes for you to kind of find the right college fit for you. This is not an ultimate list, right? Nothing out there is like, this is a perfect list for you, but it's a good place to start, right? They're going to ask you about some of those characteristics that you're looking for, some of those experiences that you want. And so it'll generate a list for you and give you some examples for you to kind of initially start and do that deep dive if you're not really sure, where to begin. Naviance can also be a great tool, especially, if your school uses Naviance or uses Score or uses, one of these other platforms. It can be a good way for you to see maybe some past acceptances from your high school and just kind of get a general sense of where students have applied, what the average score was, SAT score was, what their average GPA was, just to see kind of, do you fall within range? And I would say, just like rankings, I'd be careful with tools like Naviance, because you don't want to say, oh, a student last year had a lower GPA than me and got in, so that must mean I can get in, right? You don't want to do that because there's so many things you don't know that went into that student's application. You don't know anything about their extracurriculars, or if they were a recruited athlete, or, their parents were alums of the institution. But it can just be another place for you to kind of start, right? Rankings are a good place to start. Naviance is a good place to start. These initial quizzes asking you to kind of dig in a bit more are a good place to start until you can actually figure out some of those like foundational wants, those few factors that are definitely the most important to you before you then start to refine it a bit more. Okay. All right, so talking to students is honestly one of the things that I think is the best way to understand what the experience is like. And so, we've talked about that, right? You want to talk to current students, maybe talk to some recent grads, but we don't always know somebody that we can talk to, right? You can go to your high school counselor and ask, like, do we have any students that, got into Vassar over the last few years? Do we have any students that, would be open to talking to me about, studying chemistry at University of Michigan? So you can always start there, talk to your parents, all of that. But if you want to hear from current students, there are so many ways to actually be able to do that. And so colleges try their best to actually have you kind of have like a day in the life of a certain student, understand maybe where that student came from, what they're studying, what they do on the weekend. And they'll try to do that through blogs. They'll try to do that maybe through blogs, through social media, especially through their YouTube channel. If you are interested in a college, you should definitely go on YouTube, subscribe to their channel, and you're going to find anything from, hour-long video doing their admission spiel to like a 30-second tour to, 2 minutes on what a student does on the weekend, right? There's going to be so much information out there, and you're going to actually be hearing from current students. I also really like college newspapers. You don't just have to be a journalism or communications manager to look into the newspapers, but it can be a great way to get a sense of what's happening on campus. What are students, up in arms about? What are students excited about? Are there any like special guests coming? What's actually happening around campus? LinkedIn can be a good way too. If you don't quite know where to, if you're looking to talk to a current student that's studying something that's of interest to you or has had a certain internship, that could be a good place to go. Sometimes you have to be a little more persistent to get somebody to respond, but honestly, students want to help students. Alums want to help students. It's a good time to ask. It doesn't hurt to say, would you mind, having a quick chat with me? I would, here's what I'm curious about. I'd love to know, a bit more about your experience. what you love about it, what you would change, and so on. There are also some colleges like Bryn Mawr, for example. They actually use an app, I think it's called PeerPal, where you can go onto their website and you can actually choose a specific student to speak with. And what's great about that is you get to say, oh, the student has this similarity in my from my background. The student is studying this. The student is doing an activity that I really, that really speaks to me. And so it's a great way to actually kind of connect with them and be able to talk to them directly. So there are a ton of resources out there. Sometimes you just have to dig a little bit deeper, and sometimes you might have to be a little more persistent. But if you are like kind of coming down to the last, 20 schools and you're trying to narrow it down to a few, this is what you want to be doing. You really want to make sure that this is a place where you can fully see yourself and that you've done your due diligence and that you're going to be happy there as a student, as a community member, and that it's not, that you're not just using the rankings to decide if this is the right place for you. All right. A couple other things I would like to mention is I want you to not just, when you're looking at academics and when you're looking, really at anything in the college search, don't just look again at the surface level. Don't look at the overall, university level experience or ranking. I want you to dig down deep into, what your department might offer, into what your major might offer, right? So again, who's teaching? What is the average class size? What are the resources and the facilities like? What are you going to have access to in terms of internships, working with professors, hands-on experiential experience, like the actual classes, right? You want to look at the course catalog. You want to see when those classes are offered. You want to see what's coming, in the next few years. So you really want to make sure it's something that excites you and not just, looking at the overall, kind of university ranking or university experience. You want to make sure you're also paying attention to, is this the undergraduate experience versus the graduate experience? I think rankings can sometimes confuse students because they'll say, oh, well, this school is, overall the best school, one of the best schools in the world. And it may very well be, but it doesn't mean that it is for your major. Or it might be referencing kind of a graduate school program, a business school, a law school, a medical school. And that's not what you're doing as an undergrad. So you want to make sure you're actually looking at the programs that are available to you as an undergraduate student and not those as a graduate. So, and I would like to emphasize here, you're not just saying, oh, well, this school has a medical school attached to it. That's a great medical school. So that means that I'll get into that medical school. That's definitely not the case. So you want to be really looking at the undergraduate experience. How is that undergraduate school going to help set you up for the next steps? Whether that's you going directly into your career or you applying to grad school, you applying to med school, applying to law school. And they should have those stats on their websites as well, like how many students, that apply to med school from this college get in to med school. What kind of, pre-med programs do they have that are really going to be supporting you? Do they have any special, relationships with hospitals or, doing research with professors that's going to set you up to be a stronger applicant for grad school? So make sure you are looking at the right things. Don't just look at overall rank. Don't just look at the grad schools. Look at what the undergraduate experience actually entails. All right. And make sure, I would say, you've got to be honest with yourself about what you need to really thrive. I think it's easy to kind of get caught up in the school has a slightly higher rank, or, the school maybe comes across as a bit more prestigious from whatever, right? From social media, from your own parents sometimes. That might be what you're hearing. But again, just because a school has a slightly higher rank doesn't mean that rank won't change. It doesn't mean that it is the right place for you. You need to think about, what is the environment I need to thrive in? If I really do need smaller classes so I can be held more accountable, then that's what I need. If I I don't want to be in lecture classes. I really want to have more conversational based classes, and I want to be able to share my perspective and learn from my classmates. I need to be at a school that has smaller courses. If I need certain support systems in place, whether that's for a learning difference or, I know I'm going to get homesick. I want to make sure I'm on a residential campus that has a great advising program. So you need to really ask yourself, what do I need to thrive? What do I need to feel supported? And what's going to help me actually kind of achieve my goals, not just what's going to give me kind of a bigger name, but what's really going to kind of propel me forward, give me the community, give me the support that I need, right? So you have got to be constantly asking yourself, why is this a good fit for me? Why is the school the right place for me? And be able to actually answer those questions, right? Take really thorough notes. Know why this is know why this is the right place, because again, this is something you'll likely be asked in your actual application, by those schools in their supplemental essays. So the more research you do on the front end, the easier this process will be as you start to actually apply. Okay. All right. And I am definitely blathering on as per usual. So I am going to pick it up really quickly because I know we have so many questions. All right. So if you have the opportunity to actually visit colleges, as I mentioned, there's a lot that goes into this, but before I talk about that, I want to know, what activities do you plan to do when you visit a college this summer? Or maybe what activities have you done when you have visited a college? And y'all could just kind of throw those in. Walk around campus, great. See the residence halls, look at the surrounding amenities, great. Look into classes, discover the town, sports facilities, great. These are all excellent things, right? Look at research posters. Ooh, I like that one. See the landscape, talk to students. Awesome. Excellent, 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 right? These are all awesome. These are all great answers, and definitely something that you want to note for yourself. So when you go to a college visit, you want to come in with a plan, right? The first thing I think you should do is you want to go to the admissions website and do your homework and see what they even offer, right? If you are going in the middle of the summer, you need to know, okay, when do they actually offer campus tours? When do they have information sessions? If I go on a holiday, what does that mean? Do I need to sign up for them? Things like that, right? So you need to know what's even offered. If you're going in the summer, it's quite possible that they don't actually have classes for you to attend, right? It's, might be the summer school students, maybe in some high school students on campus versus like actually kind of being in the middle of a semester. So you might say, okay, this is a good place for me to start. And then maybe in the fall of my senior year, I'll go back to a couple of those schools where I can attend classes, probably, eat in the dining hall, maybe even stay overnight with a current student, because a lot of colleges do that. But you can kind of narrow it down. But once you narrow it down, that can be kind of a deciding factor later on. But you want to do your homework. If you're visiting over the summer, visiting over spring break, you want to be able to definitely take a campus tour, and you want to be able to attend one of those information sessions that'll typically be led by a current by an admissions officer and a current student or two. So they'll give you like a good rundown. You'll be able to ask some specific questions, but then it's that tour that's really going to allow you to talk to a student, ask them what their experience is like, what they would change, what they like, something they're surprised about, what they do on the weekends, and so on. Before you go on a tour, you also want to make sure you've done some basic research, right? It doesn't have to be super in depth, but you don't want everything you learn about on that tour in that info session to be completely new information. Like, you should know if they have your major. You should, kind of know those basic parameters you've established for yourself. You should know if it's like generally the right fit, right? And you definitely have to plan your schedule in advance, because most institutions, especially over the summer, will fill up because they only have so much space in their theaters. So you want to make sure you know what the timing is. You want to make sure that you know when tours are being offered and that you can get in. And then you want to plan, like, is there parking? Do you have to take the subway? Stuff like that, which you can kind of have your parents help you with. All right, so you'll definitely do your homework first. When you go on a student-led tour, this is as I said, this is a great opportunity to kind of dig in. It's a great way for you to get more candid information. because like the student blogs or, anything that the admissions office controls, it's going to be monitored, right? It's going to be edited a bit, and it's going to do its best to kind of play up the positive experience of, each college. But when you're talking to a current student, you can ask them for what the reality is, right? You can ask them, yeah, what would you change? What has been more difficult than you thought? What do you wish you would have known when you decided where to go? Or, what resources are available on campus that you were just learning about that you wish you would have known about, right? And that is those are some great things to be asking these tour guides. It's possible they might be studying your major. It's also possible that they aren't, but they likely have a friend who is, maybe another tour guide they know who might be studying it. So ask questions, right? Come prepared to ask those questions and to take notes of them, to take photos. If you're going with your parents, you might consider splitting up from your parents and taking separate tours. So this will allow you both to kind of ask the questions that you have, but also get different perspectives, especially because you're going to have two different tour guides. They're going to have different experiences, and then you can kind of come back and put your notes together. It also might be nice for you just to be able to have a little alone time to walk around the campus or really walk around the school and see what's available, right? What some of these amenities are that a student said, like, do they have your favorite coffee? Do they have, public transportation? Do they have a pizza joint, a late night, kind of a late night study place, right? You want to figure out, do they have the things that you're going to want or need when you're on campus? So you want to take great notes, ask honest questions, possibly split up from your parents. That way you can kind of cover more ground and get a better sense of on-campus life and off-campus life right nearby. Okay. One of the other things that might be offered in addition to an admissions information session, student tours, is the possibility of an on-campus interview. This is going to very much vary from school to school. So there will be probably a few spots for this, especially over the summer, but it's something to look into, and each of them might be a little bit different. So these might be a way for you to do an official interview with a college, especially if you're a junior or a rising senior. It might be your way to say, I know I'm going to apply. I would love to meet either with, it could be a current student or an admissions officer, and talk about myself, talk about why I want to be here. If you have the option to do that, you absolutely need to make sure that you are ready to talk about why you want to go to that college, right? So it is a great way for you to ask more specific questions and make sure it's the right fit for you, because there should be some back and forth here. You're also deciding if it's a good fit, but you need to come having done a good amount of research so that you're not going into this cold, right? Because whether or not this is an official interview or more of an informational interview, all the notes, the student's going to take notes or the admissions officer is going to take notes, and it's going to be added to your file. So you want to come prepared. You want to ask questions. You want to, you want to be able to elaborate on why each of these, this college is a great fit for you. Okay. So it can be a great way for you to learn more. It can be a great way to get in front of an admissions officer. It can be a great way to get in front of a current student versus, doing an interview later on in the process. So you will likely also have to answer questions about, what you do for fun, what you might want to study, definitely why you want to go to that school. But it should be a 30 to 45-minute conversation about yourself, but definitely come prepared with why you want to attend that institution. Okay. And it's not something you have to do on that campus. It just can be something you can do. But if you need to look into it very early before you visit, and that might actually help you plan your visits a little bit more. If you're like, oh, I definitely want to do this, but they only have one opening on July 8th and one on August 2nd. So we're going to go ahead and plan our family vacation or a family tour around this and kind of work around it. So can be a lot of puzzle kind of, piecing of the puzzle together to make all of this happen. So you want to start looking into it early. The earlier, the better, to see what you actually have available to you in terms of info sessions, tours, and the possibility of on-campus interviews. All right. And then finally, as you kind of get through this research, I want you to think about the number of colleges you're actually applying to and the list that you're putting together. So how many schools are you all planning to apply to? 3 to 5, 2 or 3, 15, I don't know, 25, 7 or 8, 10. Okay, cool. All right. So I think like on average, the number of application students are putting in has definitely gone up over the last few years. Whoa, 40. That is way too many. And it's gone up because, the admissions has gone up. The students are applying to more because there's so many unknowns out there. Schools went test optional for a very long time due to COVID. And so students are looking for more security. And so I think they've, automatically said, I need to apply to more colleges in order to increase my chances. And so it's not necessarily applying to more. That is the kind of the right strategy here. It's definitely applying to schools that are the right fit and schools that are within your range. So we'll talk about that here in just a second. But I just want to make it very clear that I think I mentioned this at the very beginning. There are no safety schools out there. I don't even like that term safety because there is almost no guarantee out there unless it is, I think, a community college, right? Or you have a state public, mandated rule that says if you're in the top, X% of your class, you have automatic admission. Beyond that, there are no safeties. Right. So you need to make sure that you are applying to a balanced list of colleges where you have colleges that have higher acceptance rates, for some that aren't just, 4% acceptance rates, but maybe some 60% acceptance rates in there. And that's got to be part of, kind of part of your research is figuring out, all right, do I have a balanced list of schools? Am I likely to be admitted into some of these? Are some of these schools maybe more in the middle and some of these schools more of my reach and dream schools? Okay. But you need to be choosing colleges that are the right fit so that, the admissions officers can really imagine you on campus. All of them should be the right fit for you, but they do have to have varying admissions rates. Because as you can see on these charts, the admissions rates are just, going down as more and more students are applying. We're also seeing that students have increased their applications kind of year over year. So I think we've gone from maybe being like 8 to 12 schools on average to maybe more of like 10 to 15. That I know that is on the high side. But let's talk a little bit about how maybe we can lower that number here as we go through these last few slides. Okay, so I always like to think of your actual college list, your final college list as a pyramid, right? Where you have a strong foundation, where you have 2 to 3 likely schools. So those schools where if you look at their numbers from last year, like their the hard numbers that they'll publish. So all colleges will publish their 25th to 75th percentile of GPA and test scores of students they admitted the previous year. So if you look at that and you go, oh, okay, well, this school has, their 25th percentile for the ACT is 30, their 75th is a 34. And you say, okay, well, I have a 28. So that means that I'm in the bottom 25th percentile for this school, which means that school is going to be a reach or, a reach plus for me. So I can't only have schools where my numbers, my test scores and my GPA are below that 25th percentile. I need to have some that are in the 50th percentile, in the 75th, and above that 75th percentile. And when your GPA and your scores are in that 75th plus percentile, they're higher in the higher end, those schools are typically likely schools for you, right? They will probably have a higher admissions rate than the other schools do. And your scores and GPA are going to be on the higher end for that institution. When schools are more of that target and match, kind of in the middle area, those schools, you're likely going to be in more of the 50th percentile, 50th and above. Reach schools, you probably are in anywhere from the middle to the 25th to the 50th percentile, or maybe a little bit below the 25th. And then Ivy Plus, like basically any school that has under a 10% acceptance rate, or maybe even 12 to 15% acceptance rate. I say those are, kind of reach plus, Ivy plus for all students. And that's just because of their admissions rates are so low. And the majority of students tend to have pretty high kind of GPA and high SAT scores. So, kind of regardless of where your GPA is, if you're applying to an Ivy, like that is a reach plus for everybody, right? There are definitely no guarantees for any of these, but you definitely don't want to just only be applying to Ivies and have one likely school on your list. You want to be setting yourself up for success here. And you want to, at the end of the day, have a good number of options. Sometimes I talk to students or families who are like, well, it's kind of Ivy or bust. Like either I'm going to go to the public school nearby or I'm going to go to an Ivy. And I can get that mentality because I know college is really expensive, but there are so many different types of colleges in between, one of the 8 Ivies and your public institution. Like if you're going to thrive in a smaller environment, if you're going to thrive in a different location, if you're going to thrive at a school that has really, niche programs that are well suited for you, then we don't just want you to be applying to Ivy and likely, in that one likely school, because you're not really applying for fit. You're kind of applying again for name or for rank. So it's a good idea to have a strong foundation. I say 2 to 3 likely schools, maybe 3 to 4 targets, and a few reaches and Ivies. You can definitely kind of switch up, switch it up. You can have more reaches, you can have more likelies. But you definitely want to have a few in each of those categories in order to ensure that you have some good choices at the end of the day. I would say 15 schools should be your max of where you're applying. There's so much work that goes into each of these applications, especially selective ones. Selective colleges have many, many supplemental questions, lots of supplemental essays. So in addition to that one big essay that you'll do, they're going to ask you like, why do you want to come here? List your summer activities, write a letter to your future roommate, tell us about a time you changed your mind or changed someone else's mind, like elaborate on extracurriculars. Like they're going to ask you so many more questions and it takes a lot of work. And for the most part, you can't reuse any of those essays. You have to write them from scratch. You have to demonstrate to those colleges that you did your research and really help them envision you on their campuses. So the more places you apply to, the more work that goes into it. And you don't want to spread yourself too thin because then you're not putting out your best work. So 40, way too many. 2 or 3, probably not enough, right? So I think there's probably some sweet spot between, 6 to 15, depending on, if you have likelies, targets, and reaches in there. All right. So just something to kind of keep in mind. I don't want you to apply to so many institutions, and the Common App actually only lets you apply to 20 total. So that should probably be a pretty good limit for all of y'all. All right. Woo. That was so much talking. I'm so sorry.
No, that was, there's a lot of really, really valuable information in there. A lot of great questions. We're going to get to at least a few of those here as well. For me to kind of summarize my notes, I know one of the big things you said was take notes. A couple things that stood out to me, and as you and I have been talking to put this together, I've been, recommending to, neighbors, relatives, any folks with kids in the class of 2024, visiting a college campus before you start scheduling visits, I think is brilliant. Kind of know what you expect to see, what you want to, what happens on a tour, what kind of things you need to plan for your own, I think is really great advice to have done your homework before you, drive to another state or, across the state to figure out, where you want to go there. I love your notes about going deep on a few schools early so that you can go back and refine your criteria. And the whole point about asking why about your criteria, I think it's so easy to just start saying, yeah, I want a big school. I want a school that's ranked this. And if you haven't asked why or gone deep, you don't quite know why those things are valuable and you may be missing out on other things. So from my notes and the things I've been recommending to others and it's really been resonating, those really stood out. And I'm sure you all have quite a few great notes coming out of this. Now, some questions that people asked that I wanted to make sure we get to. I think it was Danielle had a great question pretty recently in terms of, visits and, putting together even putting together criteria, basically everything we talked about here. What's the timeline for this process? Are they going to, how much time should this take to go from initial research to having your school selection? What do you recommend if you have unlimited time or if you're a rising senior and you have to do this quickly? How much time should you invest?
Yeah. So, I mean, the earlier you start, the better, right? As with anything. But if you're going to get started in, you're like, do I get started in 10th grade? I say in high school, if you have the opportunity at any point, like where your parents, or you're taking a road trip, or you're going to visit grandma across the state and she lives by a college, even if it's not a college that you're interested in at the moment, it could give you a different perspective, where even if you drive around it or walk around campus or just kind of jump on a tour, you can understand what it's like to be at a rural liberal arts college. You could understand what it's like to be at a Big 10 school. These are the things that you can get a sense of just, as your parents are going on conferences, you're going on vacation. Like, it's just something to take note of, take some notes, take some photos, and, just know anything that's of interest to you, right? So that's a good way to get started, 8th, 9th, 10th grade. College admissions officers should be visiting high schools again. Now that we are out of the worst of the pandemic, college admissions officers should be visiting local high schools in the fall, typically. Maybe they're not visiting your high school, but maybe they're doing an event nearby at a hotel, or they're actually, better yet, doing like a bigger kind of admissions session with 5 other colleges. And so you kind of get to go to an event, hear from 5, 6 different admissions officers, ask questions, and get a sense of how these schools are different. College fairs are a great way to get in front of lots of admissions officers, ask specific questions, but also just gather some information, get on some mailing lists, and start to learn about institutions, right? As soon as you take the PSAT or SAT or ACT, you also will start hearing from colleges, because as long as you say, yes, I want to hear from institutions, once your score is out there, colleges actually buy the names of students, based on a very wide range of scores, and they'll start, just kind of dropping into your email and letting you know about programs, and like giving you an opportunity to say, yeah, like, why don't I just open this email and kind of read through it and just see what they have to say? Because I know you're going to get a lot, but if you take 30 seconds or a minute to look through it, you might find something that you like, or something you want to dig into a little deeper. So that's kind of how you can get started, earlier. So like, if admissions officers coming to campus, like, go to that session if you can. If you have an opportunity to go to a college fair, do it. Also, there are virtual college fairs, there are virtual information sessions. So by the time, if you're already a junior and it's junior spring and you've never been to one, let's start doing some. Let's pick a couple and do a couple of virtual ones first. Walk around that local college to just kind of get your head on straight and figure out how you want to plan kind of moving forward. If you are a junior, or about to be, or a senior, gosh, it's already June, and you are about to, be going in this process and you really don't know where you're going to apply, we gotta buckle down, and we gotta use the summer to really kind of look at where your stats are, right? Like, look at your final grades for, the last 3 years, 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. Look at whatever testing you have, or think about, do I need to take another test, like maybe in August, to like kind of set myself up a little bit better. Make sure you're asking teachers for letters of recommendation and all that too. Like, there's a lot that goes into it, which we'll talk about in another session. But you need to start narrowing down that list, because applications can be due as early as October 15th. And that's not that long from now. All right. And so you've got to put together, your personal statement. You've got to answer supplemental questions. You got to get those recs, as I mentioned. You got to have your test scores. And then, of course, school's going to start back up, and you're going to be busy, right? You're going to be in school. You're going to be taking tests and doing your extracurriculars. So we've got to use this summer to visit colleges, to be doing this online research, getting in touch with students to see if you can't get a little more perspective, looking at those YouTube channels and so on. Once you kind of get your list narrowed down a bit, like we've done some filtering, you've kind of played around, you've gone to some of these sessions, you've walked around some campuses, I would say probably, honestly, it's going to take you at minimum 30 minutes at college, probably at least an hour, truly, maybe if not an hour to 2 each, to just know that that's a place you really want to apply to. And then you want to go a little bit deeper and spend time during that info session, maybe spend time visiting. So it's a lot of work. Like, there's a lot that goes into this, but I want you to think about it as a kind of an investment in your time. Like, you're not wasting any time doing this. Even if you ultimately decide, oh, that's not a school I want to go to. That's great. That means you just narrowed down, like you just narrowed down your list even more, right? You know that you don't want X. So we're not going to look at other colleges that have X. We're going to look at, we're going to look at everything else. So the more research you do, the more you're going to know you want, don't want. You're going to be more in touch with your preferences. And the better notes you take, right? It's going to help you once it actually comes time to put your applications together, because they're going to ask you in those supplements, why us? Because they're going to ask you in that interview, why us? And you need to be able to articulate that. You need to be able to imagine yourself fully on campus. So the more research you do, the better off you're going to be. You're going to this place for 4 years, if not more, right? If you might be doing a master's there, who knows, right? You are going to this place for 4 years. This is a big financial investment. It's an investment of time. And so you need to put in this front end work in order to end up at the right place, right? You want to put in this front end work so you don't say, oh man, I wish I would have thought about this. Or oh, if I'd only known, or gosh, I never even knew this college existed and I would have been so much happier there, right? You don't want to do that. We've got one shot for the most part at this. So the more research we put in at the beginning, the much better you're going to be set up to actually write the applications, and the more compelling of an applicant you're going to be, because it's going to be well thought out. So it takes time. I know it's not what we want to hear, but it's what, it's kind of, that's what the stage is right now. It's kind of if you are again, if you're about to be a senior, this summer is for kind of putting this together, getting started on those essays as much as possible, and really trying to refine that list so that it is balanced and you are as prepared as possible to start submitting in the early fall.
I love that point. It is an investment of time. You think about it, if you don't get it right the first time through, you're spending time on transfer applications and trying to find out what else is out there, or on a lot of applications for schools you realize later on you didn't want to go to. Someone asked, what happens if you get into multiple schools and then you have a decision to make, you have to do a little more research. And if you realize in April that, hey, actually, I got into 5 schools, I don't want to go to any of them, you'd be glad you made the investment up front. Hey, one other point you made about, October 15th, the original, the initial deadlines are coming up soon. It's kind of scary to think that's only 4 months away. The whole application season's coming up. A note for all the Varsity Tutors learning members, I know there are a lot of you here, and there's information if you're not to be able to check it out. We've got unlimited summer test prep, unlimited access to college admissions essays, workshops, financial aid workshops, all kinds of things. So if it seems daunting of, hey, I've really got to get hustling on this, all kinds of opportunities for help and support with the Varsity Tutors Learning Membership. We've got info on your screen if you're not already a member to check it out. And Devery is going to be back throughout the summer for all kinds of other events. If your questions are about, what matters in the essays, or a couple people were asking about, what extracurricular should I be thinking about? We've got more sessions on this. This stuff all takes time, and Devery will be back. I think the next one is in about 3 weeks. June 20th is our next class about how admissions officers, evaluate applicants. And so there's more where that came from. While we're talking about school research, because people are going to get going on that right now, a couple questions came up about, what if we don't know what questions to ask? What if we're, a lot of us is, hey, ask good questions, reach out and ask students questions. What if someone's sitting there thinking, like, I know I want to go on a tour and I know I would like to reach out, but I just don't even know, you mentioned a couple times, you don't know what you don't know. What are some thoughts on if you're not sure what to ask on a tour, or if you contact a student or have, that access, how do you even get started?
No, I mean, you're talking to a person, right? So ask them what they have liked, what they haven't liked. So it can be as straightforward as, has the school met your expectations? Like, when you were looking at colleges, what were you looking for? How did you make your decision? What has surprised you? What do you think they could improve upon? And oftentimes they'll say the food, right? But you can dig into that. Like, what's the rooming situation like? How do most people get along with their roommates that they're placed with? Do you feel like you're supported to change your major? Right? What has your favorite class been? Like, is that what you're going to study? What are some of your friends doing for the summer? Just, those kinds of questions, right? You're not tell me about who is the most respected, Nobel Prize winner on, the college campus. That stuff you can Google, but this is more about experience. Ask them about their experience, because if I want you to think about it too, all right, I'm going to college. What's important to me, right? Can I change my mind? How are students supported? what could they improve on, right? Like, these are just regular questions. So just kind of start by, they're people, just ask them what they like and don't like, really, and you'll get some pretty honest answers. What do you do on the weekend? How often do you go into the city? Do you feel close? Do you have close friends? Like, what are some of your activities? What's something you hope to do before you graduate? Those kinds of things. So, just kind of start there. And then there should be a pretty, natural flow of conversation, and listen to what other people are asking and play off of what they're asking too, because it's likely gonna, go, oh, okay, yeah, that's a great question. Playing off of that, here's what mine is. So you'll just, kind of come prepared with a little bit of those, right? A few of those. What do you like? What do you not like? What would you change? How did you make your decision? And it should flow from there.
Thank you. I think a good life lesson that I'm sure many of us have been told is people love to talk about themselves. So if you're unsure of where to get started, ask someone, what was your experience? How did you choose the school? What other things did you do? And they'll give you enough to go on to start thinking about follow-up questions or how that links to you. So I think that's I like your point that, hey, they are a person. If you get them to who is at college, if you get them talking about it, then, they'll probably keep talking, and you'll have to interject with the follow-up questions you just came up with. Hey, one other that came up a few times, a few people have asked it a different way. Someone's mentioning, if I want to be pre-med, does it matter if I go to a liberal arts versus, a bigger university, big, small, how much do the rankings matter? A couple other people have said, hey, are there types of criteria that matter to grad schools and employers that, I may be able to play with my criteria of what I'm looking for, but are there any kind of universal criteria dependent on major, grad school that it matters more what your future thinks than what you think, I guess?
Yeah. So if you want to be pre-med, you want to be pre-law, you can study anything. You can be a Spanish major, you can be an anthropology major, you can be, gender and sexuality major, you can be a biology major and be pre-med. Grad schools are looking for diversity in their applications, just like undergrad schools are. However, med schools have some requirements. So you can use your elective space, you can use your, the mandatory classes you have to take for your major to meet those requirements. So I think it's 7 or 8 courses, one being an English class, some organic chem, some bio, a bunch, a few of those classes that med schools require, and that you can easily look up, right? So you can see what classes that you have to have. What you want to do is you want to see what kind of pre-med advising does a college have, right? So do they have certain advisors that are, specifically for pre-med students? Do they, have MCAT help, right? Do they help students prep for that, which is the test you have to take? Do they have opportunities specifically for pre-med students to volunteer in hospitals, to do research? What kind of relationships do they have? Maybe they have some cool public health classes you can take, things like that. So you kind of want to dig in and see what opportunities do they have, but you also just need to know that to be pre-med, you can do anything. You can, if you love history, you can still be pre-med, right? And med schools do respond to that, right? They love students who aren't just studying biology, right? Because they want you to have a reason for going into medicine. They want to know why it's significant to you. So it's not just, oh, I've prepped for this and this is what I want to do. It's, they're also looking for a story. Grad schools do pay a bit more attention to grades and testing than I think a lot of, you might say, oh, well, undergrads do too, but they really do kind of care about your test scores, especially, and how you do in any prerequisite classes. So those bio class grades, that chem grade is going to be really important. So you also want to go to a place where you're going to be supported, and especially because those first introductory courses can be pretty tough and pretty large at any institution. So you want to make sure you're going to a place where they don't only give out 4 A's, right? And then everybody else gets B's or C's. So that's kind of something to look into. But don't use college as, I would say, colleges don't want to feel like a stepping stone to your grad school, right? They don't want you just to say, I'm going to be a doctor and that's it. And I just need to come here because that's what I have to do to go to med school. They don't like that, right? They don't want to feel used that way. So how are you going to actually utilize the resources at your school and then kind of parlay that into your career? But they're more interested in how you're spending your next 4 years there. So do kind of think about it that way. Think about, you're a whole person. You don't just need to be doctor from this point on. You can be a lot of things and still be working towards being a doctor, being a lawyer, going to a different type of grad school.
Awesome. Thank you. And I know as we'll preview, we're getting close to, actually not close to time. We're a good amount over. So we may start to wrap up.
That's
here,
my fault.
Oh, this is great. We said, get someone knowledgeable talking. They like to talk. That's why, we mentioned that. Reach out to people who have been to college, because you'll get the same kind of, elaboration. So thank you so much for spending so much time with us. I think one other thing that's going to come, we can kind of preview what's coming up next. In a couple of weeks, you're going to talk about how admissions offices evaluate applicants. Then we'll get into some specifics. People have been asking about, what's more important, test scores or grades, or SAT versus ACT. We're going to do a whole event on academic rigor, how you can show that you're qualified, what kind of things you can do outside of tests in the classroom to do that. We'll talk about the application essays. We'll talk about extracurriculars and those kind of things. So as you kind of mentioned, go to a school where you'll thrive. I know that's something that, as an admissions officer, you wanted to see in the essays, and grad school admissions officers will say the same thing, that, they want someone who's been involved on campus and all those. So we've got plenty more information coming up on all facets of the application, how to get in, and other things to be able to think about. So please join us. The next one is June 20th, where you register for this one. Most of the classes are live for registration. I think we'll have more coming up. We've also got, you mentioned the on-campus interviews. We have an admissions interviewer from Georgetown doing a couple of events with us. We've got test prep classes coming up. And like I mentioned, if you're a Varsity Tutors Learning member, there's all kinds of small groups. This is sort of the lecture model where, you have one professor in front of a few hundred. We've also got the more recitation model, small group test prep classes, essay workshops, and all those kind of things, free for learning members. And so with that said, let me leave you some information here on how to get involved in all those opportunities as well. Devery, thank you so much for so much great information. Can't wait to turn around and do it again in a couple of weeks. Thanks to all of you out there for great questions and participation. If your question didn't get answered, you've got several more opportunities, and we look forward to seeing you back, and hope that you'll tell some friends as well, because this is great information everyone should have. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.